Disclaimers. 1. This is a beta. 2. I will be comparing this game to Left 4 Dead since the developers are people that worked on Left 4 Dead, and also because Back 4 Blood is Espirito's successor. It just oozes Left 4 Dead. 3. These are my personal opinions. If you want to discuss this, go ahead. Use this as a reference point for your own reviews or whatever, go ahead. And 4. This review is based on the PC version of the game. So, I wanted to talk about Back 4 Blood and what I think of this beta. And I honestly think this game is terrible in its current state. But I do think it has a lot of potential to be a great game, maybe even as good as Left 4 Dead. So, let's start with the bad stuff, and then we'll talk about the stuff that I liked. So, first of all, the gunplay. The gunplay for me is very important. If killing Zeds is not satisfying or fun, then what's the point in making a zombie killing game? So, the gunplay is bad. The animations aren't good. The sound effects make the guns sound like cheap airsoft guns. There's no weight or power behind these guns. The guns, they just shake a lot, but they don't feel like real guns. The gunplay is just the equivalent of giving your grandma with Parkinson's a plastic gun while you'll make pew pew and ching ching sounds. That's how the guns feel. Also, something that adds to the gunplay is the gore. Gore doesn't really exist in this game. The zombies don't seem or act like they're getting shot. You know? Like they just run ahead at full speed. There's no blood, nor gore, nor nothing. It looks like they just take damage until they die. But the gunplay is so bad, it just makes it feel like they just randomly fall asleep. You know? Like you hit them enough times with your airsoft gun and they just fall asleep. That's what it feels like. The only way to know if like you're actually hitting the Z if you have hit markers on, because if you don't, you're not gonna notice. Like there's no blood spurting out, no nothing. So killing zombies in this game is not fun or satisfying. All right, next up, map design. The maps are bland from a gameplay perspective. I think that visually they are interesting. But the moment-to-moment gameplay doesn't actually change. You don't have to think a lot about the places that you are in, even at higher difficulties. Like your tactics, you don't have to really worry about tactics. You just have to hold W and keep shooting, you know? You only have to worry about boomers in closed spaces and that's it. But in let's contrast this to Left 4 Dead. Left 4 Dead, the gameplay actually changes in meaningful ways several times during a level. In Left 4 Dead 2, shortest campaign, which is the passing, the gameplay changes significantly multiple times. First, you fight in apartments, which makes exploring each room dangerous, closed spaces, leaves you vulnerable to, like it's easy to get separated and stuff like that. Like it's meaningful. And then you go into some sewers, which are super open, but the problem is that it's also really, really dark. And it's so open that Zeds can come from literally anywhere. I'm going to call them Zeds because I'm used to doing so, because I used to play Killing Floor 2, but the Zeds can come from literally anywhere, which makes you change your tactics because this forces you and your team to be super close to each other, because if you wander off a little bit, it's too dark, so you won't be able to really see where your teammate is. And this leaves you also vulnerable. Since you're super close to each other, it leaves you vulnerable to group-based specials like spitters and chargers. They can completely decimate your team, and just like that. So you are forced to expend more grenades and ammo, and you have to look everywhere, and you're overwhelmed. You know, the gameplay actually changes because of the map design. But in Back 4 Blood, even if you change locations in the level, like I think it was in the second part of Act 1 in the first campaign, you're first in you're like at the very beginning you're in an open area and then you move into some tunnels. But even though like there's a very drastic change in the map design, it still doesn't actually change the gameplay itself. Another problem is that the levels are generally really short and super linear, whereas in Left 4 Dead, again, let's talk about the passing. There was a part where there's a big like building complex where it feels like a maze, so you have to find your way around and you can explore and you can branch out a lot. That does not happen in Back 4 Blood. All right, the AI. Let's talk about the AI. Okay, this one's a bit of a doozy. The cleaner AI is laughably bad. You might not care about this if you play with friends a lot, but you will worry about it if a disconnect happens or something like that. Do not count on that bot. Just don't. If you get pinned by a Zed, like a spitter catches you in their web, then the bot will literally not help you. It will just run up to you, stare at you, and just watch you let you die a slow and painful death. Sometimes bots just jump off of high places and get themselves killed. They don't shoot at enemies that are more than 4 meters from them. They're just bad. Now let's talk about the Zeds. There have been a lot of cases where Zeds just ran away from us instead of running to us. Sometimes they were really dumb and they couldn't climb up and or over things to get to where we are. They just ran up to us, like if we were on a building or on something like elevated like a truck. They just run up to it and they just stare up at us and they wouldn't actually climb. This didn't happen as much times, but it was noticeable. Or sometimes they didn't even do anything at all. They just stare. Like we'd even shoot them, and they just stare there and do nothing. Now let's talk about another director, which I think is really important. Also, the director. The devs talked about this a lot. And they were so proud of it. Like, oh, the director is this next big thing. Well, the director doesn't really exist in this game. Its impact is meaningless. Let's compare it to Left 4 Dead's director. The director in Left 4 Dead is actually good at its job. It's creating at tense moments when you don't know when the next horror is coming. Like everything is quiet. There's just a few zombies here and then. There's suddenly a big swarm of like a big ass swarm of zombies comes in, you're scared. You're separated from your team, and then a special comes and it separates you even more from your team, or someone goes down. It's good at creating those interesting moments. Also the director will it'll see how good you're doing in the level. If you're just cruising along, then the director's gonna be like, okay, let's make the game more difficult. Let's remove some of the items. Let's make ammo less common, and let's add more zombies and stuff like that. So it keeps the gameplay interesting. And it's also, if you're not doing very well, then it'll help you out a little bit. But it's not going to help you to the point where you're going to be able to just cheese through the level. So the director, simply put, does its job well, and its job is to make the gameplay more interesting. But the director in Back 4 Blood doesn't do this properly. It doesn't create those interesting moments. It also, another flaw of the director is that it takes everything to the extreme. It either gives you too much items or too little. Like, it doesn't matter if you're cruising along the level or not, it just randomly just flips a coin. That's what it feels like. And also, the director can just send armies of zombies at a time that are literally impossible to hold out. So you have to track back a lot just to stand a chance. Or sometimes they send hordes and it's just like a dozen zombies or so. So there's no in between. The director in Back 4 Blood fails at its job at making the overall gameplay interesting. The card system. In theory, I like this DI a lot. I think it could make the gameplay a lot more varied and replayable. I really like it in theory. But in practice, it's not good. There are some cards that are simply must-picks. Like the most basic example is the card that makes your bash and insta-kill against common infected, which also makes melee completely useless. But Some cards are simply must picks. Other cards are simply irrelevant. They give you such tiny bonuses that they're simply not noticeable, especially when you go up in difficulty levels. Also, the corruption cards, which are cards that the director chooses to try and mix up the gameplay. Well, it also doesn't do that, because most cards are just boring or uninteresting challenges, like don't die or don't get down more than 3 times. The only one that I felt like actually had somewhat of an impact was like one card that made the map more foggy, but it also didn't change much. Like the only ones that are actually relevant are cards that buff the zombies in one way or another. So this doesn't actually mix up the card system doesn't actually mix up the gunplay, even though that's its main goal. The sound design. The sound design is lackluster. Zed's the sound system in general is just bad. It's hard to like pinpoint where a Zed is coming from, and the mixing of the audio, like the audio levels, are also really bad in this game. Zeds don't make a lot of noise, so sometimes you don't even know that a Zed is behind you until it takes half of your health away. This problem also goes hand in hand with the special Zeds and their Qs, which I will talk about later. Like one time, like me and my friends were fighting a horde when suddenly a tall boy spawned behind us, and we couldn't hear it. It just wiped two. So since we couldn't hear it, we couldn't prepare, and it just wiped 2 teammates, like in the blink of an eye, before we even knew what happened. All right, the melee. I don't see the point of using melee, especially with the card that I mentioned that changes your bash into an insta kill. It's useless unless you have a very strong card deck to complement it with. But if you complement it with like your deck with your melee, then you're going to be ignoring very very important things that are way more important than melee. So it also just using the weapon itself does not feel good. Also, using melee is really wonky, since sometimes this happened to my friend a lot. He would hit us even though we were behind him, or sometimes we weren't even close to him, and he would still hit us somehow. So melee is really wonky. Melee is not good in this game. Utility. Using molotovs, grenades, pipe bombs aren't as satisfying as in Left 4 Dead, you know. Also, gas cans and propane tanks aren't that good to use. They don't feel good to use. Alright. Last part before I move on to the special infected, and that's a doozy. The common infected. I can't really put my finger on why this happens, but the common infected just don't feel... They just don't... I don't know how to explain it. They just don't feel the same. You know, in other games, when there's a lot of zombies, you know, I feel like I'm overwhelmed, I'm scared, you know, like I'm getting ready to fight. But in this game, that just doesn't happen, you know? Like, there's a lot of zombies, and I just get slightly annoyed more than anything. It doesn't, you know, I don't know if like it's a gunplay, the director, if it's a combination of those things. I don't know what it is. But zombies don't feel like actual zombies, you know? Like, it's hard to explain. I hope you understand, but that's what I'm saying. Alright. Now the big boy rant. The special infected. Boy, do I have a lot to say about the special infected. Alright. The special infected are the bane of my existence. They are really bad, and it is the most infuriating aspect of this game. This completely killed the game for me. There are so many problems. Where do I even begin? Okay, so let's start with this. The sound design of the special infected. First of all, biggest problem with them is that special infected do not make a sound cue when they spawn. This is game breaking. This has costed my friends and I so many runs that we have literally lost count. Let me give you 2 examples. One time, my team and I had just cleared up a horde, so we were sharing ammo, man, just preparing to advance in general. So once we were done, we opened the door, and a boomer comes out of nowhere. There was no sound cue, we didn't hear it groan or anything. There was literally nothing. It literally did not do anything. No noise, no sound, nothing. So, and since we opened the door, and it exploded, it killed all 4 of us in the blink of an eye. Just like that. We molded for like an entire 5 minutes after that. There was nothing we could do. Because it's not like... Also, like, the design, the mechanics behind the zombies are bad. I'll explain that later, but... Okay. Another time. Two tall boys spawn. This goes in hand with the AI director going too far, too little. 2 tall boys spawn, and none of them made a sound cue. Like, it's not like the sound cue is barely hearable. There is literally no sound cue. We had just killed all the Zeds in the area, and we were separated. We were distant from each other. We were scavenging for stuff. And since there was no sound cue, we were not ready at all. We were in a closed area, and we died in less than a minute. It's so unfair. The game isn't difficult. It doesn't punish us for mistakes that we as players make. The game is punishing in itself. It punishes us for playing the damn game. Another problem that results from the lack of a sound cue. Also, it's not just the lack of a sound cue. It's the lack of a voice line that a character says, in which it says the name of the special infected. Is that what each special does isn't even obvious. So you have to fight that one special Z multiple times to understand, well, what the special zombie can do. Compare this to Left 4 Dead. Once you fight a special infected once, you immediately understand what that special does, and you will not forget it for the rest of the time that you play. Let's break it down. Let's break down the process of encountering a special infected for the first time in Left 4 Dead. First, you hear a sound cue that is easily heard even if there's a lot of stuff going on. If a lot of people are shooting, explosions, whatever, it's easily hearable. Like, it drowns out the rest of the sound of the game so that you can clearly hear the sound cue of the special infected. Not only that, it's unique and it's super easy to identify. So you won't get confused regarding what sound belongs to what special. Second, after that sound, a character will say a voice line which has the name of the special. So you can easily associate a sound to a name. So Nick will say, "Careful, I hear a jockey around," or "I hear a witch crying," something like that, and you immediately learn the names of the special infected. That does not happen in Back 4 Blood. And we played for 10 hours, and we never heard the name of the special infected. We had to look it up in the wiki, in the goddamn wiki. We had to look it up outside of the game to figure out what was going on. Imagine that. I mean, if you're a Warframe player, you don't have to imagine it, but... Anyways. And after that voice line, the special Z appears, which one is incredibly unique visually. It's very easy to identify it, even if there's a lot of stuff going on. It's very easy to identify because it behaves in a different way, and visually it's very different from the common infected or from other specials. That is how it should be in Back 4 Blood, but it isn't. It's not at all. Like, we have to look up the names in the goddamn wiki. I cannot even fathom that. A combination of all these previous problems makes the special zombies extremely confusing. Especially, oh my god, the variants. Where do I even begin with the goddamn variants? As far as I know, And I'm saying as far as I know, because even after 10 hours, I am still confused and I am not 100% sure, and neither are my friends. And this information was not in the wiki. We had to look it up, and there was nothing in the wiki. But for as far as we know, each special infected has 2 variants. So the lack of those 3 things that I mentioned before, which is the iconic sound cue and the voice line and that stuff, makes the game so confusing that even after 10 hours of playing, we didn't even know that variants existed. We didn't know that variants of specials existed because of how confusing this was. We only learned that there were variants when we talked to other beta players. And this is not even the beginning. This doesn't even scratch the bottom of the problem with the variants. Another thing that adds to how confusing, that adds to the confusion of how specials work, is that every variant of a special looks and behaves exactly the same. There is literally no difference between variants. They look literally exactly the same, and since they make no sound cue, you can't differentiate them. They look exactly the same. So you can't know how to deal with that special until it attacks you. Imagine. Oh my Jesus, you don't have to imagine if you play this godforsaken game. Please do not play for this godforsaken game. Excuse me. This is my most infuriating example. So, as far as we know, again, I have to clarify that. As far as we know, there are 2 variants of boomers. One spits from afar, while the other variant walks up to you and explodes. Now, since there is no sound cue, no way to know the name of the Z or the variant by means of a voice line, and the fact that they are identical in every single fucking way, the only thing that you can do is shoot it and pray to God that you don't instantly end your run because you shot the exploding variant. There is literally nothing else you can do. There is nothing at all. Because if there's not a lot of stuff going on, then maybe you might be able to, just maybe, although it's not probable at all, you might notice a difference in behavior between them. But when there's a lot of chaos going on, it's impossible. It is literally impossible. Oh my God. Another problem. There's still more problems about the special infected. Still more problems. Another problem is that the specials usually don't actually feel like special zombies. Some, like the spitter, don't actually feel like a special zombie, since all they do is deal damage from distance, and they have slightly more health than a common Z, and they're harder to hit. That's it. There isn't a scary music or something that makes an attack from a special more impactful. Remember when a boomer in Left 4 Dead spits on you, your entire screen goes green. There's scary music. You're scared. You're disoriented. All those Zeds are coming to you, and all those things add up in that attack. You learn to respect that special zombie, but none of that happens in Back 4 Blood. So specials don't actually mix up gameplay. Let's take another example from Left 4 Dead. When a spitter, which I think is the weakest special there is in the game, all it does is that it has you shoot it once and it's dead, and it spits a pool of acid from a distance. Now that is still scary, and you still learn to respect that attack. Why? Because a lot of things happen. It's just not that acid pool. It doesn't just deal damage. It's a large area. So you could get separated from your team, which leaves you vulnerable. Or maybe you can't rescue a teammate because he's on the other side of the acid. Or even yet, let's say that a charger grabs you and he pushes you, and he just happens to push you into the acid pool. So you're getting gangbanged by two specials, and that made it that moment special because it felt like it felt like the zombies were actually working together to bring you down. It made the AI smart, you know. Or when a jockey grabbed you and pulled you into the acid, or a smoker, you know, it makes sense, you know. You learn to respect everything because everything is a serious threat. Well, that does not happen in Back for Blood. Oh my god. I need a shower. I need to take all of this doo-doo off of me. Okay? Now, not everything in Back for Blood is bad. I will admit that, okay? So I'm going to talk about the good things now, but something I want to say is that the combination of all of these things makes for a really bad game. It's not a mediocre game. It's a very, very bad game. And I think you should not buy this game. If you have pre-ordered it, you should cancel your pre-order. I do not recommend this game. Like, all these problems add up, and it just makes gameplay bad and boring. Like, the most basic thing in Left 4 Dead, when you reach a safe house, like, there's that music, there's this sense of relief. Holy crap, we made it. Like, it feels amazing, it feels rewarding, it feels good. Or when you reach the finale and you actually complete the finale of a campaign, like, there's this big cinematography moment. I can't speak English right now because of how mad I am, but it makes you feel good. It's like, yeah, we did it, let's go, you know. Even those most basic things, Back for Blood fails. Okay, now let's talk about the good stuff. The controls and the movement. I think the controls are pretty good. I think the controls are pretty good. The same goes for aiming. Movement is also pretty good, although jumping is a little bit weird. But apart from that, I have no complaints. It generally feels good. The gun attachments. This is something that I really, really like. They come in as 4 different types: sights, stocks, barrels, and magazines. These attachments have a significant impact on how your gun works, which I like a lot. There's a lot of variety, coming in at a total of 20 attachments just in the beta. 20 attachments, and they're completely unique from another, and they change your guns in very different ways, which I really, really like. The hub area, or Fort Hope, is really cool. It has a gun range where you can try out every weapon attachment and some grenades, although the grenades don't respawn after you use them, which should be fixed. You can also create your card decks here, you can unlock some stuff, and you can start a campaign or versus match. Something that I will like, which I think would make Fort Hope a lot cooler, is that, like, more stuff to do or events. Like, for example, out of nowhere, a wave of Ridden appear and you have to fend them off. Or challenges you could do with your friends while you wait for the others would be pretty cool as well. The cleaners. I like the cleaners gameplay wise because each of them has a unique starting weapon and a special trait that they only have, and also a passive that gives small buffs to your team. The only problem with them is that as characters they're not as interesting. Weapon balance. This is something that I also really like. Each weapon in this game feels useful. There's no must pick gun, or I never felt like I had to get rid of this gun because of how bad it was. What guns you use are down to personal preference, and I love that. I really like that. The shop /economy/inventory. I do like how the up system in Copper works. It adds a layer of depth to the game, while also making it more challenging and interesting. I also really like the amount of items that are in the game. Like in Left 4 Dead, there is not a lot of variety when it comes to this, but in Back 4 Blood, there is a lot of this. There's a lot more than just nades. There are stun guns, which can break you out of a grab, or razor wire that slows down zombies and other cool stuff. There's a lot of variety to it. Also, you can carry 2 guns, and 2 an offensive and a healing item, which is also like that in Left 4 Dead. But you can also carry a quick deploy item, so you can carry 3 utility stuff, which I think is also pretty cool. The ammo. I also really like how the ammo works in this game. In Left 4 Dead, there was just one ammo cache from which you could replenish your ammo regardless of what gun you had. But in Back 4 Blood, it's different. There are 4 types of ammo caches, which are light/SMG, rifle, shotgun, and sniper. So with this, you have to pick up ammo considering what gun you have. So if you have a shotgun, you have to pick up shotgun ammo, which I think is a really good change. I like that. Graphics/performance. I have a potato PC, and I had to lower the graphics to a minimum, and this game still looked pretty decent, and I managed to get around 60 frames, which is really surprising. And since this is just a beta, hopefully the developers can further optimize the game. And the last thing that I have to say is the variety in guns. Holy Jesus, there are so many guns. There are so many guns, and I really like that. Hopefully, if they improve the gunplay, then that'll be really good, because there's a lot of variety in guns, and I really like that. Well, that's it. I would like to know if you guys agree with me or not, or if I should have talked about something that was worth mentioning. Thanks for stopping by and listening to me rant.